Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms. You can find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin. And unfortunately, I got some bad news for you guys. Tonight is going to be a solo podcast because Dale had some stuff pop up, so he wasn't able to make it on. So we were originally planning on doing some buy, sell, hold, but he had all the players that he wanted to quiz me on and see my thoughts on them. So I don't know who those players actually were. So this is kind of last minute, so we're kind of making a little bit of a shift. So today we're just going to be mostly going over the start sits of the week from last week, kind of recapping that. I'll give you a couple guys that I really like for this week, and then a little bit of advice for where we're at in the season, and then I'm just going to jump right into the ERI recap. So thank you guys for joining. Before we get too far into it, if you can, just give the podcast a thumbs up, a comment, a like, wherever you're at. It just helps with the algorithm, all that stuff. Just gets the podcast out to more people. I have many opinions, as I've been told many times, and people really like to sometimes hear them, sometimes like to disagree with them, but it's all part of the fun. So the more people that can hear the podcast, the more people I can argue with or share my opinions with, I'll say. So if you could just leave a comment, anything that just helps with the algorithm. So I appreciate you guys for that. So last week, a little bit of a rougher week for me with my start and sits of the week. Last week I called out Eno Benjamin, Darius Slayton, and Russell Wilson. I went 1-2 on the week. Only Eno Benjamin finished as a top 24 RB. Everybody else fell outside of the top tier. For Russ, he was number 15 on the quarterbacks, which isn't terrible. It's not going to kill you, but for quarterbacks, I set a little bit of a higher standard of being a number one, top 12 guy to be considered a hit at least. Where Dale, he did a little bit better. He ended up going 2-1. He had a great call out on Ramondre Stevenson. So that was a great one there. Alec Pierce just barely missed being a hit to make him go 3-0. Alec Pierce was wide receiver number 25 on the week last week. Depending on your scoring format too. This is full PPR, so it might be a little bit lower in half, but in full PPR, he was number 25, so just barely missed there. Really liked what Pierce has been able to kind of put together these first couple of weeks. But then his last call out was Justin Fields, who finished inside the top 8, which is a great call out as well. So, Dale is starting to catch me a little bit, so I got to be a little careful. I think I'm still one game up on him, but yeah, can never sleep too much on Dale. So this week, because he's not here, we can't give our start and sits. He didn't have a chance to send those over to me before, he got sidetracked with his family stuff. I'm just going to give you a couple guys that I really like for this week that haven't been able to produce so far very well for fantasy the last few weeks. So number one guy is going to be Tom Brady. And I know that Tom came out of retirement, threw away his marriage basically for one final go around in the NFL. Hasn't been that great. Had a couple up weeks, not last week, but the weeks before that. Last week was a little weird. He missed most of the walkthroughs on the week. He went to Robert Kraft's wedding on Friday, got back Saturday. So, which, for a professional athlete, it's kind of a unique situation there. They ended up losing to Pittsburgh last week, and even though they're the better team by far than Pittsburgh, I think that it's really going to set Tom Brady off to want to get some revenge, show that he's still one of the best in the league. And they were moving the ball pretty well. They just were not doing anything inside the red zone last week, and I think that's going to improve. I know that Carolina has a better defense, but I am not worried about that at all this matchup. The whole situation with Carolina, they're, with an interim head coach in Steve Willis, I think is his name. So there's just a lot, or Steve Wilkes. There's a lot of things up in the air. They just, kicked Robbie Anderson out of the game last week. and they traded him away to the Arizona Cardinals just a couple days after that. So there's a lot of impressiveness with Carolina right now, and I think that this is the perfect bounce back game for Tom Brady. So I am starting him. I'm starting him in my home league that I'm 1-5, trying to get a win this week, and I think I like it a lot. I know that I haven't been the best with my quarterback predictions in that league just yet, but I really think that Tom Brady's going to finish inside the top 8, maybe even the top 5 this week. All right, the next guy I want to call out is someone that is finally getting back from injury, and that is going to be Keenan Allen. And this offense the last couple weeks, it's had a few good performances, but they're not getting the wins that they thought they were going to be able to get. And I think a lot of that contributes to missing Keenan Allen. Now, I don't think it's a coincidence that Austin Eckler has seen a massive upsurge in targets the last few weeks, where he's been very productive. He's been getting quite a few targets. And if I pull it up, give me 1 second here. I'm going to fill really quickly while I pull up Austin Eckler on Sleeper, because his targets the last few weeks have been insane. Last week he had 16 targets. 4 targets the week before that, 7, 8, and 10. And this is all since Keenan Allen has been gone. Week number 1, he had 4 targets. So I think that they've been utilizing Austin Eckler a lot more in the Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler role. And Keenan's going to come in and just be just fine on this team. Like even someone like Joshua Palmer last week had 12 targets against Denver. And that's just crazy to me. So I think that Keenan Allen is going to jump right back in there. Week number 1, he looked really, really good before the hamstring injury. They held him out a very long time. He's missed 5 weeks with a hamstring injury, which is much longer than the average. I'd say the average is probably maybe 2 weeks. Then you always have the risk of re-injury, but it seems like they really held him out just to make sure that there would be no risk of re-injury on this thing, kind of really let him kind of rest it up the last few weeks. So Keenan Allen should have a great game here. They're against Seattle, so it's a positive matchup. And yeah, I think that it's going to be awesome there for him. Now, the last guy I did want to call out is going to be running back Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Zeke has not been very good on the season either so far. So what to do with Zeke? There's been some tough matchups, and last week he did get a touchdown, which put him up there. Wasn't the best, not the best performance for a running back, but it put him up there because it was a pretty down week in general for these guys. But 15 points last week against Philly. He's had some tough defensive matchups: Washington, the Rams, the Giants, Cincinnati, Tampa Bay. It's just been rough for the Cowboys' rushing attack the last few weeks. He gets Dak back this week, and we know that Dak likes to dump it off to Zeke and Tony Pollard when he gets under pressure. So you know that he's going to get an upsurge in targets because, 2 targets in week 1 against Tampa Bay. That was with Dak, but again, they kind of used him more as a blocker in that game because their offensive line was really beat up. Their offensive line is getting a lot healthier now. But ever since 2-1, it's not been great for Zeke in the passing game. And we know that Dak likes to dump it off to him. So Dak being back, and it's a plus matchup with Detroit. Detroit is coming off the bye, so they've had a little bit of extra time to prepare, but their defense still is not that great. So I like Zeke quite a bit this week. I think that he's going to kind of pay off as old Zeke value. I'm not expecting top 5, but I think top 10 is definitely in the realm of possibilities for Zeke this week. So he's someone that I feel you can play him without concern this week, and that's my thoughts on him. So those are 3 guys that I really like this week. With buys kind of filtering in, that's where it gets a little bit tougher. But yeah, there are a few guys that haven't produced the best for fantasy so far on the season, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of a confidence booster. So that said, I'm going to switch the camera over to myself. Doing solo podcasts, I am out of experience with these. I'm going to do more of them next summer, of course, but yeah, I'm rusty, man. I'm rusty. I'm used to having Dale here. But again, thank you guys for listening. And before we go too much further, I just want to touch on a little bit of advice for fantasy football with where we're at right now. So it's week 6. What to do if you are 1-5 or 0-6. Now, this is something that I did on a lot of my leagues here this last weekend. So one thing that I like to do, and if you're using Sleeper, it makes this very, very nice. Sleeper tracks your maximum points for and also your points for, points against, things like that. I think pretty much every league, I know ESPN tracks points for, points against, things like that. But the maximum points for and points against are very useful because it tells you when you have the max points for, it tells you whether or not your roster is just underperforming, like you're making bad start-sit decisions, or if your roster is just as a whole is not quite where you thought it would be. And a lot of my leagues, so there's a couple leagues out there, shocker, where I'm 2-4, 3-3. My home league that we're recapping here in just a little bit, I'm actually 1-5. But my points against in my home league is astronomical. I'm 100 points against, which I'll cover here and I'll complain about again. But my points against is I'm 100 points higher than the next team. Middle of the pack in points for, climbed a lot the last couple of weeks. I've been top 4, top 3rd place this week in points, but I'm middle of the pack in points for. Now, maximum points for, I'm a little bit higher. I think I'm like 5th in max points for, which tells me that I'm not really making the worst start-sit decisions. I'm kind of right in the middle there. My roster has not been as good as I kind of anticipated, but I've also just gotten really bad luck because people have just been teeing off on me week after week. Now, there's a couple leagues where I'm in rebuild, and I was kind of hoping to flip them quickly, but it looks like 1 year is not going to be quite enough for a rebuild. Going to probably take maybe a year and a half. There's a lot of youth on these teams. I have a lot of reliance on George Pickens, Alec Pierce, these kind of guys, Kenneth Walker, which now looks like it's going to be useful. I've got Deshaun Watson on a league with Zach Wilson is in a super flex. So there's a lot of different variables to it, right? Well, I'm 11th in points for. I'm 11th in maximum points for. So basically my team is just not there yet. It's not developed yet. It needs more time. So that league, I'm not a contender in. My home league, even though I am 1-5, I would say that I'm more of a contender because my points are a little bit higher. My points against are really high. That's going to come down as we start getting into these bye weeks and people have to start making sacrifices with their starting lineups. That league I'm really, really deep in, so I can, weave my way through these bye weeks a little bit easier than some of the other teams. So points against is going to come down. Points for should stay fairly steady, maybe even tick up again a little bit more over the next couple of weeks because I'm getting some guys back and things like that. So I would say that even though I'm 1-5, I am a contender in that league still. So that's one thing that I would advise you to do if you're, even if you're 5-1, 6-0, look at your points for, look at your max points for, look at your points against. Are you really low in points for and you're really low in points against? That means you might be a little bit of you might be riding high when you shouldn't be. And the whole reason why that's important is I think that if you can identify that, if you're 6-0 right now, and let's say you're 12th in points for, but you're 12th in points against. This is going to be an extreme example here. What I would say is that tells me that you need to make a move to get pieces to contend at the end of the year. Because when it comes to playoffs, you're at 6-0, you're almost guaranteed at that point to get into playoffs. You'd have to lose every game for the rest of the season, which is just very unlikely. So you'd have to really get unlucky to miss playoffs. So you're going to be in playoffs. So that makes you a contender, regardless of whether or not you feel like you should be. Maybe you fluked your way into 6-0, but you are now a contender. Go get pieces that are going to help you contend. And they don't have to be game-breaking guys. We've seen these players that are able to produce. At the end of last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown, seemingly came out of nowhere at the end of the season, finished the last 6 weeks of last year as like a top 10, top 6 wide receiver. It was just an insane run for him. And, I say seemingly out of nowhere because I always loved Amon-Ra St. Brown, but there's guys like that all over the league. Alec Pierce is another guy. By the end of the year, he might be just cooking. Treylon Burks. Some of these guys that haven't produced just yet. Sky Moore is another guy. Christian Watson. Some of those guys that just haven't produced just yet, but by the end of the year, they might be cooking. So you go buy them now while they're a little bit cheaper. You get guys that can help you come playoff time when they do start to click a little bit more. Russell Wilson is another guy. Like if you're weak at quarterback, I truly think by the end of the year, the Denver team is going to be clicking more on the same page. There's just too many variables right now that are unknown, and it looks bad. Trust me, I understand that. I've been watching the same games as you guys. It looks really, really bad. I acknowledge that. But by the end of the year, like maybe even, and if Russell Wilson isn't your cup of tea, like an Aaron Rodgers, one of these guys that they have a history of being very good, but so far through the beginning of this year hasn't worked out just yet. Those are the guys that I'm trying to invest in for a playoff push, Brandon Cooks, someone like that you can get on the cheap and really make an effort for that. Now, conversely, if you're 1-5, you're 11th in points scored, you're middle of the road in points against, you're probably not a contender. You're going to be in rebuild. Go ship some of your veterans, get those pieces for the future, get those younger guys, younger assets that are going to help you long term, and just kind of commit to that now after 6 weeks. If you're right in the middle of the pack, just keep playing it out for a couple more weeks, kind of see how things go. You could go on a 4-0 run by week 10, and then you're looking pretty good for playoffs, and you can kind of evaluate there before your trade deadline. So that's just my advice, looking and being constantly vigilant on your points and looking at some of the metrics behind that can be extremely helpful. And I know it seems like the most basic information, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do that. So just don't be one of those guys. Go out there, be proactive, be ahead of the curve, because you don't want to be caught holding the bag because you think you're a contender. And again, your points are very, very low. Your points against are very, very low. You fluked your way in, maybe you're not 6-0, but you're 4-2 and you're 12th in points and 12th in points against. That's not great. You still have a chance to kind of, throw in the towel. You could also make the moves like I was talking about for a playoff run, but at 4-2, if your points are that low, it's much less likely than 6-0 to be in the playoffs. So just something to think about. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out on Twitter or on YouTube, and I'd be happy to kind of give you my thoughts on your team. More than happy to kind of walk through some scenarios with you. There's everybody's team is unique. Not every 3-3 is the exact same. So feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to walk you through some stuff. But that said, we're going to wrap up with the advice and just get into the recap for week number 6 for the ERI League. So thank you guys for tuning in. Last week was not the best. It did kind of stink for me. Again, people are just continuing to tee off on me. I was 3rd in points for this week, which is just absolutely wild. I know all the stats out there are that it was a really weird fantasy week. Not a ton of points across the board for a lot of people, but seemingly Braden just absolutely whooped my ass last week. 185 to 136. Like, what did I do to deserve this? Everybody he played just whooped the crap out of me. So Joe Burrow, 33.5. I started Tom Brady. He got me 13.5. The best quarterback scoring week I've had so far this season. Let's go. I'm 1 week away from breaking 20 and breaking the curse for my quarterback position. And it really sucks because my running backs have been so good the last couple weeks. It's just like I feel like I'm wasting these good weeks. But I guess Saquon's been elite all year long. He's the number 2 running back. Who is number 1 right now? That is crazy that Saquon is number 2 in this league. I got to see who number 1 is right now. Stats, season. Austin Eckler. Man, Austin Eckler has been killing it the last couple weeks. You thought he was dead after week number 1, but 30, 24, 36, 34. Goodness. And that makes sense because I did play him last week. Braden started him. Just absolutely murdered me there. Just going through Braden's roster here. Joe Burrow, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, Michael Pittman, Christian Kirk, Travis Kelce got 20 points for him there. Michael Pittman had 27 points. Joe Mixon had 17 points. Romeo Doubs is the seemingly only bust that he had. Mark Andrews, 25 points. His kicker got 15 points. It was a wash on defenses, so I don't even need to mention that. But, man, that's crazy. Even Matt Ryan went off on his bench. So, rough day for me. Juju Smith-Schuster went off on his bench. It was a great day for Braden there. So, can't complain too much there. My side, I thought I made pretty good starts, but yeah, I guess it wasn't good enough, obviously. Saquon Barkley again went off. Fournette went off again. CeeDee Lamb was okay, but that was kind of a whooping that the Eagles gave them. Chris Godwin was pretty good again for Tom Brady. The offense was rough altogether, but man, Chris Godwin, he has come back since he's come back from the hamstring injury. Again, he took 2 weeks for a hamstring injury. Keenan Allen took 5, so he better be fully healthy this week. But 10 targets, 6 targets, 12 targets, that is a lot. 28 targets in 3 games. You'll love to see it. That's kind of where he left off last year. The yardage isn't quite where we want it to be. It's getting up there. It's improving every single week. So you kind of think that he's getting a little bit more healthy as time goes on. But yeah, Chris Godwin has been everything I've kind of needed him to be the last few weeks and more. Dallas Goedert, kind of a down game, but they didn't really need him too much in that game. Gabe Davis and Allen Robinson both had solid games on my bench. Gabe Davis just continues to score touchdowns. That's just what he does at this point. He averages about 6 targets a game, 5 targets a game, and scores touchdowns. That's all he does. So he has 4 touchdowns on the season out of 14 catches. That is crazy to me. Like, that's just the percentage on that is just wild, and it's just what he does. So he's a great red zone target, and I don't think that he's going to go away anytime soon. So I like Gabe Davis there. Allen Robinson had a great week against the Carolina Panthers. This is why I'm also really high for Tom Brady this week. Finally a good week for Allen Robinson. Like I said, it just kind of sucks because I feel like I wasted it. My bench, Justin Fields over Tom was a slight increase there, but yeah, it would not have mattered at all if I would have started the ideal guys there last week. So congrats to Braden. Moves on to be 4-2. I'm 1-5 now, as I mentioned before. Next matchup, Eric versus Max. Max is kind of thrown in the towel on the season, trying to get a rebuild. He moves to 1-5. Eric picks up the victory. Pretty good victory there, 132 to 115. Eric was just behind me in points, but Josh Allen, Tyler Algier, and J.K. Dobbins, his running backs killed him this week. Mike Williams killed him as well. But, when you got Josh Allen, Mike Gesicki as his starting tight end, and Brandon Ayuk, those guys teed off pretty well on Max. Amari Cooper had a solid day as well. But, yeah, J.K. Dobbins, Tyler Algier, pretty rough there. Meanwhile, Max, he's kind of in a rough spot. His running backs look pretty good. He's got Devonta Smith, Jimmy Garoppolo, pretty solid starts there. Ramondre, Dale's start of the week last week, had a solid performance there. Dalvin Cook had a pretty good week. He had a touchdown. Kind of disappointing. You take away the touchdown, you only get 9 points. It's kind of disappointing from a running back. The biggest problem with Dalvin Cook right now is they are not utilizing him in the passing game at all. Week number 1, he had 5 targets. Week number 2, he had 6 targets. The last 3 weeks, he's had 5 targets combined. That is not great there. And I don't know if it's just because of the shoulder injury or what. Hopefully. But, I mean, in week number 3 against Detroit, he had 0 targets whatsoever. So it kind of stinks a little bit there, but I don't think that's going to change too much as we go on here. They are on bye this week, so that's going to be a big hit for Max. Mike Evans had a down week, but again, the whole Tampa offense just kind of stunk. The only reason Chris Godwin was better is just due to target volume strictly. Everett had a down week, David Montgomery, Jacoby Myers. So Yeah, it was just kind of rough for Max. Tyler Boyd, Najee Harris on his bench. Claypool, that might be something worth watching as time goes on here. I think they said that Kenny Pickett will be starting this week if he's healthy, so that could be kind of a one and done for Chase Claypool. Something to monitor, though, going forward. But in week number 5 against Buffalo, I think it was Kenny Pickett that whole game, if I remember right. Yeah, 100% of snaps against Buffalo. Claypool did have 9 targets in that game, so Claypool might be seeing a little bit of a resurgence here. We'll just have to watch that as we go on. So, yeah, on the other side though, Tyquan Thornton for Eric on his bench. It was a pretty solid week for Eric. Kenyon Drake on his bench as well. Yeah, pretty good week for him all in all. Alec Pierce on his bench as well, just barely missing that top 2 guys. All right, the next matchup was a blowout. Rob's team has successfully imploded. He had 60 points against James, who had 112, doubled his points almost. But yeah, pretty rough there. Mahomes putting it up for James. But again, it was a down week for a lot of guys. Jamar Chase came through for James. Clyde and Aaron Jones combined for 10 points, which not great. Hollywood Brown got injured in that game. Going to be out for a little bit of time here. Deontay Johnson, that's something to monitor as well. So there was a report that came out after the game that I guess Deontay Johnson got into it with Mitch Trubisky after the game where Mitch got pulled a couple of weeks ago against, I think it was the Jets in that game. And Mitch Trubisky basically told him to sit down and watch his mouth because Deontay Johnson wanted the ball a lot more. And if we know anything about it, if you have kind of that diva mindset in Pittsburgh, it is not going to fly. And I know that everyone is going to point to Antonio Brown, but when Antonio Brown was with the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was like a normal human being. It wasn't until he left the team that he became a psychopath. So Deontay Johnson is treading a very, very fine line with Mike Tomlin as the head coach there. I don't know if that's going to fly too much. But, on the other side, he is their best wide receiver probably. I mean, I'd probably say George Pickens is better, but, it's up for interpretation. Paris Campbell on James's bench, someone that's worth watching as well. I guess it came out at the end of the game or on the broadcast that Paris Campbell's been having a really good practice the last couple of weeks. Was he not having it before? He got 11 targets in this game where, he had almost 10, 15 targets, 5 weeks, the first 5 weeks. He had 11 targets this last week. So what is going on, man? I want to believe in Paris Campbell, but you're just hurting me right now. You're hurting my soul. So please stop that. Make it consistent. That's all I want. It's a little bit of consistency from Paris Campbell. That's all I'm asking here. On the flip side, though, it was rough for Rob. Not a ton he could do. Hunter Henry over Tyler Higbee, wouldn't have guessed that would have been the right call. Wan'Dale Robinson, you're not starting him in his first game in the NFL. And then the rest of the guys on his bench really didn't do too much there. Trevor Lawrence outscored Justin Herbert, but again, that's kind of a tough call there. But yeah, all of his starters, when your kicker is your highest scorer on the week, it's just a bad week. So not much to say about Rob's team. There will be better days ahead for him, but he does move to 2-4. We'll get to this full standings here in just 1 second. The other matchup that was kind of interesting was the Great Rebuild, Ken versus Hot Chub Time Machine, and that was Ryan, and Ken pulled out the upset. Oh my goodness. He was projected to get smashed, 135 to 111. That's how big of a favorite Ryan was going into this one. His team let him down so hard. Ken put up 134, just behind me in points as well. And Ryan, just a measly 97 points last week. I got to get my shots in because half of his team was on bye. But Jalen Hurts was solid. Alvin Kamara was solid. Nick Chubb, down week there against New England. Kind of expected. Our defense is really good, like usual. Deebo Samuel, solid week, 16 points. Not great for Deebo, but pretty solid. Kittle, a solid week as well, 16 points for him. DJ Moore, David Njoku, down weeks for those two guys. Cortland Sutton, down week as well. And nobody cares about the kicker and defense. But yeah, he had Derrick Henry on bye. Who else? Damian Pierce on bye. DeAndre Hopkins, he's getting back this week finally. Devontae Adams was on bye. The Tennessee defense was on bye. So he had a lot of heavy hitters on bye last week. So, better days are definitely ahead for Ryan. So get your wins while you can, I guess. But great for Ken in this one. He made some great calls. Geno Smith was a little bit disappointing, only 13 points there. Miles Sanders was great. Breece Hall looks amazing. I am going to eat so much crow after the season because of Breece Hall. I was so down on him, but holy cow, the dude looks legitimate. Adam Thielen had a touchdown. Jalen Waddle had a touchdown, or no touchdown, but 6 catches for 130. That offense is just so disgusting. Like, him and Tyreek is just gross, man. So good. He started Tony Ferguson. The ball's on this guy to start Tony Ferguson, who got a touchdown in his first ever NFL start as a rookie tight end. What is that? Travis Etienne, Allen Lazard, all these guys had a great week there. So props to Ken, moves to 3-3, gets the upset again. You got to get those wins while you can. Now, the last matchup, a little bit of a murdering. The second highest point scorer on the week was Dan, like usual. Didn't get his number 1, so there's that, but absolutely killed Keelan by 60 points, so not even competitive whatsoever, kind of like me and Braden. The only difference is I was the third highest scorer going against the number 1. What the hell, man? Oh my gosh. My points against is just absolutely insane. But yeah, great matchup for Dan. Not much you can really say about it. We've talked about his roster every single week. McCaffrey, Stephon Diggs, Zeke had a good week. His quarterback situation looks a little rough right now, but that's pretty much it. When you got Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, and Christian McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson had a down week of 17 points. Like, his floor is just so high. 17 points for Cooper Kupp in a down week. It's just so stupid. I hate it so much. Oh, gosh. It's so frustrating. But yeah, he has no JT the last couple weeks. He'll be getting him back here soon. Really likes Joshua Palmer on his bench. Got George Pickens, down week for him, so lucky he didn't start him. But yeah, I mean, Keelan's team is just suffering a little bit from the lack of depth. Jeff Wilson had 0.5 points on the week. A little bit disappointing there. Terry McLaurin has been bad all year. Just absolutely killer on the year. He's the wide receiver number 32 in PPR leagues right now. Oh, that's a bad look. He's 27 years old. They just signed him to a long-term contract extension. Yeah, it's not looking great for Terry McLaurin. Tyler Lockett, you kind of got to ride the give and the take of Tyler Lockett. Last few weeks, he's been really good. Finally had one of his down weeks, which his down weeks are very down. So, and when you look at his bench, Keelan, like I said, suffers from a lack of depth. His best point scorer on his bench was Harrison Butker for the Kansas City Chiefs. So, yeah, not a great week for Keelan, just a little bit rough. But, better days are ahead, excuse me. He is getting, I know that he's getting Cordero Patterson back here in the next couple of weeks and a few other guys that were on bye last week. So there will be better days ahead for him. He hasn't had Jameis Winston, but, you got Lamar, so you're probably not rocking Jameis too often. But, yeah, Keelan is someone that's been struggling a little bit. He has the 1 win on the season, but it's slowly starting to fall apart a little bit for him. So final standings on the season. Dan reclaims the number 1 overall spot. He is 5-1. Massive points just gap between him and second place. James is in second place, also at 5-1, but a 270 point difference between him and Dan, just absolutely ludicrous. Braden is in third place, a massive gap between him and Ryan, who is tied with 4-2. Eric is also 4-2, so he comes in at 5th place. Ken is in 6th right now as the only 3-3 team. I'm going to be coming for that 6th spot. We'll see if I can do it. I just have to beat out Ken. Shouldn't be, I should say this, and Ken's going to whoop me when I do finally play him, so I can't talk too much. I'm on a mission. Rob is in 7th place. Keelan is in 8th place. Rob is the only 2-4 team, and then 3 of us are tied at 1-5. 8th place goes to Keelan, 9th place myself, and 10th place as Max. Again, my points against are higher. Keelan is in 2nd place in points against, and he has 100 points less than me scored against him on a weekly basis. So it's been a rough start. That's why I kind of say this team is someone that can compete. I am now, I think, in 5th or 6th place in points for, 5th place in max points for. So, my team is starting to finally come around a little bit more as the season goes on. I've made a couple of trades. I should be getting Dak back. So that's potential for a lot of points there. Tom Brady is someone that should be having better weeks here in the next couple of weeks. So, if I can get 20 points from my quarterback position, oh my goodness, my average will be like 140 to 150, which I would just be so happy. But for right now, not there yet. We'll see how next week goes. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for joining. Next week, hope to have Dale back. And this is just a temporary thing. So a little bit of a quicker podcast, trying to just wrap it up as quickly as I can. Don't want to, go into too much depth. And with all the allergies and things like that, my voice has been killing me the last couple of days. So again, thank you guys for listening. Follow me over on TDC on Twitter at TDC_Calvin. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, if you have any questions on what to do for your strategy going forward. Again, I talked about it earlier. If you're 1-5 or 5-1 and your points are a little bit out of sorts, high points for, low points against, whatever, vice versa. Feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to kind of walk you through what my thought process is going forward. I can even look at some of the players on your roster, kind of just give you my opinion there. So feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help people like that. Again, follow me on Twitter. If you can, just give the YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're listening to the podcast, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, subscription, whatever. Just helps with the algorithm. I thank you guys so much for listening. Have a good night.